New polling shows President Trump's approval rating has taken a hit amid overwhelmingly unpopular immigration and deportation operations. According to the latest AP and ORC poll, his approval rating stands at 36%, down 4 points from just last month. And a year into President Trump's second term, 3 new polls show more voters now say Joe Biden did a better job as president than Donald Trump. A Harvard-Harris poll found 51% of registered voters say Trump is doing a worse job than Biden versus 49% who say he's doing better. The latest Rasmussen poll found 48% of likely voters say Biden did a better job as president. It's compared with 40% who chose Trump. And a new YouGov Economist poll found 46% of U.S. adults say Trump is doing a worse job than Biden, compared with 40% who say he's doing better. We're going to dig into a little bit of the mentality behind those numbers with Matt Bartlett, who was a former U.S. State Department appointee during Trump's first term. Also with us, the host of When We Win with Maya Rupert podcast, Maya Rupert. She's managed mayoral and presidential campaigns, and she also has a new book out, The Real Ones. It is out now. I am holding my copy quite proudly. I cannot wait to dig in, and congratulations on publishing it. So let's just kind of start here with the politics behind the polling, right? I think immigration is obviously the thing that is lending the most to an issue that Trump rode in on with positive approval. And now that the country sees what he's doing, it's falling. And so for Republicans who have had a winner on this, when you watch the way that the administration has overstepped with their deportation agenda, are there Republicans who can get this back on track, or is this just the White House's show and they're along for the ride?
Yeah, great question, and I'm not sure that you can get this one back on track here. Yeah. As you said, immigration, illegal immigration, a very legitimate issue in our country.
Totally.
One of the president's most powerful, strongest political issues. And what happened? Secretary Noem, Corey Lewandowski, Dan Bovino, neutered it.
Greg Bovino,
neutered it, neutralized this issue. Typically in politics, it takes a lot of political jujitsu to make your opponent's strength a weakness. This wasn't Democrats doing it. This is his own administration coming up so short in a very sad, horrific, maybe historic ways that, again, now you're seeing, as Joe Scarborough tweeted, you saw years of open border policies that reflected in polling that Americans want it back. Now you're seeing open cruelty, and that pendulum swing right back.
I think that's right. And I'm wondering the ways that you see Democrats trying to maneuver around this issue. Yes, they're pushing for accountability, but is there something more for a party that, frankly, and by their own omission, has lacked a coherent immigration strategy over the course of the last decade?
Absolutely. And I think there are 2 pieces of it, right? There's the dealing with ICE piece. And I think more and more you're seeing what has moved to the mainstream of the Democratic Party used to be this fringe idea, but it's that we can have immigration enforcement without ICE because it is too easy. This idea that it's become a rogue agency, more and more people are seeing that was kind of baked into its creation, that there's a way to do immigration enforcement that isn't lacking in compassion, that isn't inhumane. That's now the mainstream position in the Democratic Party, and that is entirely because of how the Republicans handled this moment. But then there's the broader issue of immigration used to not just be enforcement. It used to be an entire system where enforcement was one piece, but we were talking about a pathway to citizenship. We were talking about fixing our asylum process. You're hearing people bring that stuff more and more in because we can't just focus on immigration as a mechanism of enforcement. That's never been the history of that issue in this country.
Yeah, immigration is not just deportation. And I know that Republicans have made this phrase of pathway to citizenship. The Trump administration and its allies always, well, that's amnesty immediately. I think the other piece of this, too, as I look ahead to the midterms, is the ways that Democrats now are trying to use the Epstein issue as a way to pierce the veil for MAGA voters who feel lied to by Trump and allies about transparency that they've still not yet gotten. And I wonder, because you spend a ton of time in New Hampshire, the ways that you're hearing voters maybe feel open to the fact that the administration is not as honest as they say they are, especially on this issue and others.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And let's just be clear, Epstein should be a pursuit of transparency, of justice for the victims, the hundreds, if not thousands of girls. Politically, it's very asymmetric, atypical, how it fractures. Like you just said, a lot of this is our government telling us the truth? And a lot of people still continue to ask, I'm not sure that that's the case. We just saw a disgraceful hearing on the Hill this week with the Attorney General. So, yeah, I think, right now, what are we hearing from Democrats? The Epstein class in terms of referring to Republicans. And maybe some of that rings true because so many, even in the cabinet, have ties. Again, I'd be careful about how caution how we approach this. It should be in terms of justice. The shelf life on this. We'll see how you approach the midterms. But again, right now, very legitimate questions remain.
Yeah, and I think I did some reporting on it this week. The idea that they are trying to use this, Democrats are, as a way to say there is a system for the elites, the haves, and the have-nots. And that is a message that branches not just Epstein, not just immigration, but also when it comes to affordability. And I think it takes us back to 2024, where Republicans won all three branches of government by focusing their campaign messaging on pocketbook issues with ads like these. Watch.
Prices have gotten way too high, and quality of life has gone down. And we're stuck with do-nothing politicians.
I remember when $20 fed the whole family with change to spare. As a mom, I know every penny counts, so I'm on a mission to slash wasteful spending and roll back prices for families.
My name is Monica de la Cruz, and I approve this message because the cost of groceries is getting way out of hand. Menos. Look, shopping for the family.
And now, of course, this is a similar playbook that we're going to watch Democrats put up. But I think what's important about these ads, not just that they go back in time and show us the way Republicans ran, but these are some of the most vulnerable districts on the map. Pennsylvania, New York, Texas, Virginia. We showed Jen Kiggins. These are the places that Democrats are now trying to target with this same message. And I wonder if you see them doing that well, or for Republicans on the flip side of that, have they gotten away from it?
I think they've gotten very far away from it. And I think what you described is exactly how Epstein is really going to play out in the midterms.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to see is Republicans having to own what Trump has essentially made them own, which is that they are the ones trying to protect a system where the wealthy and the elite get one set of rules and everyone else gets something else. And we are seeing more and more that voters are tired of that. Voters are really coming together around this idea that the system that is set up so that the powerful don't have to play by the same rules, that is really upsetting to voters. And it comes out in affordability. It comes out in democracy. We should all have one set of rules. And if you're watching this play out in Epstein, how are these the people? They're not talking about the people in the grocery store, right? So it's an entirely different audience. And I think every congressional Republican who is running in the midterms is going to have to, if they want to talk about affordability, the question is, well, if you're willing to protect people and let them live by a different system that's set up for them, the system that we're living by is rigged against us. How do you square that? And I don't think they have an answer for it.
Yeah, and I do think that's also going to be a disciplined message that Democrats are going to have to do because it's easy to lose the thread in all of that. Can Republicans get out of the paradox box that they are in on this right now? Can they steer the ship back as they talk about it's tax season? We just did tax cuts. I hear this from Republicans all the time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's do a little table setting here. 2024, massive year for Republicans, right? The House, the Senate, the presidency on a very frothy economy. By the way, in 2024, Republicans lost 2 seats net in the House. OK, so we should just remember that. Does anybody think things are better right now than they were in 2024 for the Republican Party? I'm not sure about that. And forget the Republican Party. How about the American pocketbook? So, yeah, the affordability issues, what brought you to town can absolutely drive you back out. I'm not sure there's any type of messaging or even policy that we're seeing right now that's going to, convince voters otherwise. Again, very rocky road headed for the GOP, much of which is on their own making.
Yeah, and yet still so much time before November. So we will see what we see because each week brings some new thing. Maya Rupert, congratulations on the book. Matthew Bartlett, thank you both for joining us. I always appreciate these conversations.